Hi and welcome back. This is part 2 of applying for a job. In the last lecture video, we went over what employers are looking for, building your professional brand, and cover letters. In this lecture video, we're going to be talking about writing resumes, resume design, and job interviews. So let's talk about resumes and start with when and where you want to put your resume. Ask yourself, who has access to your resume? Can your current employer see your resume if you're putting it online? Can you update your resume at no cost? I know a lot of hiring websites will let you put your resume up there, but if you want to update it, you have to pay for a membership or something like that. So it's important to ask yourself, is it worth it? And does your resume include any personal identifying details that you don't want out in the public? A lot of times, especially recent graduates, they go out and spread their resume far and wide. You may not want to do that with a document that has like your home address on it. So thinking about what information is on there and who do you want to have access to that information is critical. Now, let's talk about writing your resume. I'm going to start with the advice that you write your own resume. You know yourself better than anyone else does. So make sure that you are putting time into this. Sometimes people will just download a resume template and pop some information in and think, okay, that's good. But that template may not be able to really accentuate or highlight who you really are as a person. So think about writing your own resume. And if you have a resume that you have written ready to go, then you're more likely to be able to adapt it to different situations and update it for particular job applications that you're interested in. So an attractive resume has 4 characteristics. And regardless of what design you use, you want to make sure that you have all 4 of these things on your resume. First of all, generous margins. You do not want your text to go all the way from the very left side of the page to the very right side of the page. That's visually overwhelming. So make sure that you have margins and some blank space on your resume. You also want a clear type. Your font should be easy to read. You want your resume to look balanced. And you want your resume to have a clear organizational structure. We're going to talk about some different types of resumes, but whatever type you use, you want to make sure that somebody can look at your resume and immediately find the information that they're looking for. The resume also must meet 3 standards. You want to provide clear, specific information without generalizations or self-congratulation. So for example, maybe you want to talk about your communication skills. What specific communication skills do you have? Don't just say I have good communication skills. Do you have technical writing skills? Do you have a public speaking background? That sort of thing. But you don't want to say, I'm the best at public speaking, or, I'm the most gifted writer you're ever going to come into contact with. You don't really want that in your resume. So clear, specific information, but not generalizations and not self-congratulation. You also want your resume to be free of errors, and you want your resume to be honest. Do not put on your resume that you can speak Spanish if you cannot speak Spanish. It's the same thing with skills or specific programs or that sort of thing. If you have a beginner level knowledge of something, indicate that or leave that off your resume. So there are 2 main types of resumes that most people are going to create. So the first one is a chronological resume. This resume starts by listing your work history with the most recent listed first, and then just goes down basically, here's the jobs I've had. If you've been in your industry for a number of years, you have really good work experience, you want to highlight that, this is probably the best type of resume for you to use. Then there are skill-based or functional resumes. this is where instead of focusing on specific jobs that you have, you focused on the skills or the tasks that you did at that job. So for example, if you're going into a customer service field, you might highlight the customer service skills that you obtained at your different job rather than listing like, hey, I've worked at Sonic and I've worked at Papa John's. Because what you did is maybe going to be more important than where you did it. So those are the two most common types of resumes that you're going to see, and what type of resume you use is going to depend on your history as well as what works best for the job that you're applying for. There's other types of resumes. You're going to see combination resumes that have a little bit of both of these. Infographic resumes are going to be resumes that are comprised mainly of graphics or images rather than text. Sometimes you're going to get a resume with a profile. Sometimes you have a targeted resume. This is specifically for this one job. I'm creating this one resume. And then you have mini resumes, which you might pass out, or non-traditional resumes. And I put some more resources in our online classroom to kind of go over different types of resumes. So a chronological resume has 6 elements: identifying information, objectives or sort of your summary of qualifications, your education, your employment history, your interest and activities, and your references. So let's start with the statement of objective. This is what you want to do. What type of job are you looking for, or what position are they hiring for, and how can you meet this potential employer's needs? You want to be specific here. Are they looking for somebody to come in and lead a team, and are you the right person for that? Or are they looking for somebody to come in and analyze the data? What is it that they're looking for, and how can you meet that need? Then you have the education section. This is where you talk about the degree that you got, or maybe the institution that you went to, maybe the location of the institution. All of this is subjective in terms of what you're going to put on your resume. So for example, when I started my higher ed journey, I started at the University of North Texas. I spent a year and a half at UNT, but I did not finish there. I actually finished my degree at Texas Women's University. So I have Texas Women's on my resume. I don't have UNT. But if I was applying for a position with UNT, I might decide to include that on my resume. Some people include their majors and their minors. Some people include areas of study or research focus that they did. Some people include GPAs. Some people include just major GPAs. That's really up to you. And it's going to vary widely on the job that you are seeking. Excuse me. If you are seeking a job in education, where you got your education is probably going to be more important than, say, if you're seeking a job in like marketing. So there are some things that you can do to kind of stand out. You can list your grade point average. If it's not great, don't put it on there. There's no requirement for that. You can talk about courses that you took that would really be applicable to this job. If you had special accomplishments, if you received any honors and awards, you can include that as well. And then employment history. This is going to include where did you work, and in addition to where did you work, you might include things like what skills did you learn or practice while you were there, what equipment are you familiar with, money, how much money did you make. Some people put this on resumes, some people don't. This is sort of an industry standard. Some industries like it, some industries don't. There are some jobs that pay X number of dollars. It doesn't matter how much you made at your last job. This job pays X number of dollars. There are other jobs where they might look at how much you made at a previous place of employment and decide what to offer you based on that. This is not a requirement that you need to put on your resume, but some industries do prefer to see that on there. If you are trying to find a better job, sometimes it's beneficial to put this information on there because you're thinking like, well, I make X number of dollars now. I'm going to go apply for this new company. If they are going to, try to lowball me and offer less than I'm making now, then I am not going to do that. And then employers know, hey, he's not going to leave his current job or she's not going to leave her current job for less money than she's making now. So maybe we need to offer a little bit more, that sort of thing. You can talk about documents that you created. You can talk about people that you managed. What was your position there? If you had any notable clients, you can include all of that in the employment section of your resume. And then interest and activities. Did you participate in any community service organizations? Do you have any hobbies that are related to your career? Excuse me. Did you participate in any sports? Did you participate in any university-sanctioned activities? If you're applying for a job within Merrill Lynch, they don't care if you were in the drama club in university. But if you're applying to, work at a theater, that's obviously something that is relevant, so it would go on your resume. Generally, the rule is if it is relevant to the position that you are applying for, include it on your resume. And then references. So it's up to you whether you put your references on your resume or just put something on your resume that says something like references available upon request. Choose your references carefully. And make sure that the person that you are asking to be a reference for you knows ahead of time. Don't surprise anybody with this for a couple of reasons. You don't want them to give you a bad reference or not give you a recommendation for a job. And it may not be something that they feel comfortable doing. So give them the opportunity to decline ahead of time before you give out their name and information. Also, if you are sending your resume, out in the dozens or the hundreds, you may not want to give out somebody's phone number or email address to that many people. You may want to wait to see if they actually want to interview you and check your references. So you can also put things like computer skills, military experience, language abilities, willingness to relocate, willingness to travel. Those sorts of things can be on your resume, especially if it is relevant to the job that you are applying for. So now let's talk about skills resumes or functional resumes. They have basically the same sections, but they're just set up a little bit different. So identifying information, objective or summary of qualifications, skills, education, employment history, interest in activities, and references. Let me go back for just a second. For identifying information, I do want to say a lot of times people will put their home address on the resume. I don't recommend this for a couple of reasons. You're putting your resume on the internet. You're putting it on Indeed or something like that. You don't want somebody to be able to find out where you live. But it is important for a potential employer to know what city you live in. So for example, I don't live in the city that I work in, and it is important for my employer to know that because my boss can't call me and say, hey, can you come in the next 15 minutes? We have an issue. Well, no, geographically, I cannot come in the next 15 minutes. So I usually recommend that people just put the city that they live in rather than their entire home address. Your objective or summary of qualifications is going to be similar to a chronological resume, but then instead of an employment history where you go job by job and talk about what you did, you're going to talk about specific skills. I have this customer service skill. I have this communication skill. I have this marketing skill. I have this technical skill. I have this computer programming skill versus I worked at this place or I worked at this place. Education is going to be similar. You might list employment history. You might not. Same thing with interest and activities on a chronological resume. Does it matter? Is it applicable to what you're doing here? And then references are going to be the same. So really the main section that's going to change is your employment history and skills. The chronological resume is going to focus on where you worked. Skills is going to focus on what you've done. And it doesn't necessarily have to be in a job setting. If you have volunteered and developed these skills, if you have developed these skills in college and university, then they can go on your resume. All of the classes that you take are developing marketable skills that you can put on your resume. Critical thinking, communication, teamwork, meeting deadlines, all of that is stuff that you already have experience with as a student. So sometimes if you don't have the job history, you can present the skills that you have. So before we talk about acing the job interview, I do want to say that there are some really great resume resources on or in our online classroom. Make sure that you're using those resources and make sure that you're always researching what does this particular industry want in a resume. A resume for somebody in personal finance is going to look very different than a resume for somebody in graphic design. So think about, what does my resume need to look like compared with the industry that I'm going into. Now let's talk about what you can do to ace the job interview. So here's some guidelines for doing well in job interviews. The first one is study job interviews. This is something that is a skill. It takes practice, right? A lot of times people think, oh, I'm just going to walk in and I'm just going to answer their questions. There are some people who are really good at this naturally. There are some people who are not really good at this naturally. But that doesn't necessarily mean that one person is going to be more likely to get the job. What that means is, if this is not something that you are naturally good at, then you just need to develop those skills a little bit more, because these are skills that you can develop. Look at resources. There are books. There are practice questions. There are lots of things that you can do. Study the organization that you've applied to. What is sort of their company's atmosphere like? What are they known for? Look them up on Glassdoor. Get as much information as you can. Walk in as prepared as you can be. Think about what you can offer the organization. Whether it's a small organization or a big one, what do you have to offer? What can you bring to the table that nobody else can bring? And it's okay to say, hey, this is what I can bring to the table that's different from other applicants. Here's why you should pick me. Study lists of common interview questions. A lot of times interviewers ask the same questions over and over. So know what those questions are. Study common interview questions. Be prepared. There are tons of resources, especially on social media, that deal with like, how do you answer the question of, tell me a trait that you have that's negative, right? Nobody likes to answer those questions, but there are good ways to answer those questions. So study that. Use your resources. Use social media. There are hiring coaches that make content for free that is available. Go out and find that content and study it. The other thing that I highly suggest is compile a list of questions that you want to ask. There will be a portion of almost every interview where they say, do you have any questions for us? The answer should always be yes. Take questions in and ask those questions. Not only are they interviewing you for a position, you are interviewing them to find out if they are the company that you want to work with. This does a couple of things. It shows that you are prepared, it shows that you have done your research, and it shows that you value the contributions that you can make to this organization. So always have questions that you want to ask. And then rehearse the interview. Practice. Have somebody ask you the really awkward questions that interviewers ask. Practice your answers. Practice being succinct in your answers so that you don't ramble. But the more that you can rehearse it, the better. So, ask yourself these questions too. When should you arrive for the interview? So, I always think about 15 minutes before your interview starts is a good rule of thumb. But here's the thing. Are you going to pull up and park right in front of the building? Is your interview on a university campus? Because if it is, you may have to park in visitor parking, and then you may have a 20-minute walk to wherever you're going. So just kind of plan ahead. When should you arrive for the interview? You obviously don't want to be late, but you also don't want to show up 45 minutes early. Think about what you should wear. Usually you want to be dressed about as nice as the person who's going to be interviewing you. So if you're showing up somewhere where everybody wears suits and ties, you wear a suit and tie. If you're showing up to interview at Target, you want to be dressed nice, but you're probably not going in a tuxedo. Think about your body language. How do interviewers interpret your body language? Are you sitting up straight in your chair? Are you slouching? What is going on there? Think about what questions you're likely to be asked. Think about how long your answers should be. Are you somebody who likes to give 1 or 2 word answers? And if that's the case, how can you expand on that? Are you somebody that tends to ramble, especially when you're nervous? And if that's the case, how can you rein yourself in? How do you know when the interviewer wishes to end the interview? I have been in interviews where I am done asking questions and the person just wants to keep talking. So make sure that you kind of have that social awareness of when the interview is over. Think about what questions you can ask in the interview. Always ask questions. And then get the interviewer's contact information. Just so that you can write a follow-up letter. Thank you so much for this interview. Would it be possible to get your contact information? I would love to just send you a quick letter of appreciation, something like that. But then that also gives you the opportunity to follow up if you have questions about the job or the position, that sort of thing. And then lastly, you do want to follow up. There is a couple of ways you can do this. If you never hear back, just send a letter of appreciation for the job interview. Maybe you weren't the right candidate for this job, but sometimes that letter of appreciation lets the employer know, like, this person is very thoughtful and maybe I will consider them for a position in the future. Obviously, if they offer you a job, you can write a letter either accepting or rejecting that offer, depending on your personal preference and needs. And then if they reject you, if they say, we've gone another direction, that sort of thing, you can send them a letter saying, thank you so much. I'd appreciate it if you consider me for any future positions, or thanks for the interview, that sort of thing. But following up with a rejection is a way to help just kind of keep fresh in this employer's mind, like, hey, maybe this is somebody we might want to consider for a future position. So here's some common interview questions. Screenshot this. You're going to see these pop up a lot. There are ways that you can answer these questions that are beneficial for you. So do some research about what is going to help you get that job. If you have questions about any of the stuff that we went over today, check those resources that I put in our online classroom and then feel free to reach out. You guys have a great day.